they'll grow again anyway in this weather, don't you worry about that?
Exactly. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
How's life?
We're home.
Josh, get
Yeah, I had a couple of weeks.
Karen actually had a really big job. So really how like it's exhausting. We just kind of do like 1 day each, but then it's kind of like just like although yesterday
Listen to that, right?
but then we're also covering lens because he doesn't really so hence why I it's like today off. In fact, he hasn't stopped it. So rude.
Surviving, not very
Still not at that. There is just noticed that I've got something here now and it's moving. So today is like Brisbane to the city of Brisbane to Bari. So like the road is relatively quick. So really close. So like the King City already moving. Like they're already up on the side. That's something to watch, but it's at the moment a lot of levels not maybe yet. But like now today is going to be some to the city. So they're not like really concerned that we'll be like 2022 or anything, like that's not been mentioned. Yeah, it's just something we can see because the ground's so wet and like the trees are starting to so it means there's like more to the landscapes. And like that's what concern.
Yeah, it's a bit wet for early.
The fuck.
That's definitely going to be a question later. Proper rain for another year.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, oh my god, all the project's going to be so upgressed because it's going to be so dry.
Yeah.
They went to that rain and now
Hello, mate. Still recording for Lizzie.
it doesn't look like there's too many roads. Like yesterday, it was all the exits were like closed.
You live in
Awesome. Yeah. Like
They're saying that they've got the signal.
just chilling, can't get on your one. Don't even think about it. Luckily I know.
Sorry, 9 Sydney.
we sent a journal.
9 Sydney.
That's the case.
Well, like Robin,
Thanks, mate.
where is this to she's had internet and reception. She's like, hey, just checking in, I've been off the grid. And I was like, you okay, babe? Yeah, really. Clearly a very relaxing Christmas for him.
Yeah.
Because we're going straight into Sydney till she said in the morning news. So.
Is it still working? Yeah.
Yeah, if you couldn't see it, you think it would just. I would, you would.
Exactly.
Have you got any idea how long they're going to make?
I was told 5 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, then I'm not sure like how to Wayne, Billy, Amy, Lee, the team, who does what.
Anybody in the hallway for a heads
No,
up?
and whether like we have to get someone else to do Karen's stuff.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. Unfortunately, it's been another night of torrential rain, particularly in southeast Queensland. So it's been another night of torrential rain in southeast Queensland, and unfortunately it seems like the rain will continue through the rest of today. We're looking in the next 24 hours of rainfall up to 350 millimetres in some parts of southeast Queensland. What that means is now is not the time to be out and about. If you're in parts of Queensland receiving torrential rain at the moment, the best thing you can do is stay at home and stay off our roads. Roads will be dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding could occur in places you don't anticipate or you can't consider flooding. It can happen in an instant, and that can put your life and the lives of others in danger. So the message is clear. Please, if you're in an area where there's torrential rain, please stay at home. Please stay off our roads until the weather and the rain passes. Unfortunately, a lot of this rain is falling in parts of Queensland that were smashed by the Christmas Day storms. And our thoughts are with those communities as they deal with more torrential rain over the next 24 hours. I know a lot of people are tired and frustrated. I understand that. We all understand that in the government. But please keep your families and your friends safe. That's very important. We understand people are tired and frustrated, but we ask Queenslanders who are suffering this additional rain to keep themselves, their families and their friends safe. I also wanted to say something about small business. We know small businesses have really been hit hard in the southeast, particularly in the Gold Coast and some parts of Logan, by this weather event. And we know this is a particularly busy time for trading normally, but those businesses have been impacted badly by this weather event. So I'm pleased to say, in support with the Australian government, I'm pleased to say that in conjunction with the Australian government, we're announcing support for small business today. So disaster assistance and essential working capital loans are now available for affected small businesses, primary producers and not-for-profit organisations in the City of the Gold Coast, the Scenic Rim Regional Council and the Logan City Council to assist with repair and recovery of essential equipment and for loss of income. So they are concessional loans that will now be available across those local government areas, and I'll ask Minister Murray Watt from the federal government and Minister Lance McCallum, Queensland's Small Business Minister, to say a little bit more about that when they address you today. So I might now hand over to the BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology, and David Grant to provide a weather update. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. So as the Deputy Premier mentioned, we are seeing ongoing areas of heavy rain occurring across southeast Queensland during the course of today. And there are indications that some of this activity may even linger into the early parts of Wednesday morning. As a result, we do have a severe weather warning that's in place for many communities across southeast Queensland. There's still the potential for further locally intense rainfall, and since soils are now very much saturated, there is an increased risk of dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding, and even the potential risk of localised landslides during the course of this event. Numerous flood warnings are now current across parts of southeast and central Queensland, and these even extend to parts of northeast New South Wales. New or renewed rises will continue to be possible during the course of today, with further heavy rainfall forecast, and with some dams now spilling across southeast Queensland. Beyond the southeast corner, we're also got to be mindful that where communities are recovering up around where Tropical Cyclone Jasper impacted, we do have ongoing severe heatwave conditions that will persist across the far north of the state and will continue through much of this week. Delving deeper into some of our flood warnings around southeast Queensland, we do have a moderate flood warning that is ongoing for the Logan and Albert rivers, where we've seen significant rises in those rivers overnight. The Logan River at Bow Desert is now above the minor flood level and approaching the moderate flood level, with further rises possible with further heavy rainfall possible. Elsewhere, we're seeing flood warnings for the Nerang and Coomera rivers. There is a potential for renewed rapid rises in rivers and creeks in this catchment, with the potential for further heavy rainfall during the course of today, and also with dam spilling in that area. Beyond southeast Queensland, we also do have a moderate flood warning that's going for the Dawson River, with the potential for Taroom to reach the moderate flood level during the course of later today and into this evening. But of course, as mentioned, heavy rainfall is still continuing around southeast Queensland. We do have flood warnings in place, particularly around our Gold Coast areas. But being mindful of this weather systems, we're going to see the focus of it shift towards Brisbane and upwards towards the Sunshine Coast during the course of today. And with that, that's where we're going to probably see our primary flash flood risk during the course of today, into tonight, and potentially even into early parts of Wednesday morning. I'll now hand it over to the State Disaster Coordinator. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Deputy Premier. Good morning. As we've heard, the risk of flash flooding remains today. We're seeing significant rainfall right across the catchment areas from the Gold Coast right through to the Wide Bay area. As the system contracts today, we'll see significant rainfall in the Greater Brisbane Sunshine Coast area. At the moment, there are currently two emergency alerts in place for the Gold Coast and Scenic Rim in relation to flash flooding. And we have a number of warnings out under the Australian warning system for flash flooding and recommending people who are in low-lying areas to move to high ground. Overnight, we've seen a number of rescues, we've seen a number of evacuations from campsites. What we are seeing are creeks and catchments rising and falling quickly. Just because it's not raining outside, it does not mean that those catchments won't rise quickly. We've got a lot of water upstream, we've got dams spilling, that are impacting those catchments. So we are seeing them rise. The Dawson River out near Taroom, we've already seen it rise, and we have people isolated near Taroom as a result of that. And we're already doing work around the Logan and Albert River for the low-lying communities in those areas. I've been briefed this morning from Energy Queensland that they have over 700 crews out today undertaking reconnection where it's safe to do so, mainly around Tamborine Mountain and the Jimboomba area. Overnight, I also, as the State Disaster Coordinator, progressed a further request to the Federal Government for assistance in clean-up. We know that with this storm event, rain event, yesterday, today, the night before, this will have a significant impact to the damage that already occurred from our Christmas Day and Boxing Day storm events. We know that we've got landslips occurring area, we've got significant trees down over roadways. So what we did last night is we progressed a further request to the Federal Government for assistance in clean-up, in addition to the Disaster Relief Australia staff that we have on the ground today, in addition to the over 500 emergency services workers that we have out, SES, Rural Fire Service, Fire and Rescue Service, Police, assisting with the clean-up out there today. We still have 2 evacuation centres established, one at the Nerang Bicentennial Centre and one at the Coomera Sports Complex. Overnight, we have seen people come into these evacuation centres, but I'm pleased to say that all people are now residing with family and friends. I'm also pleased to say that at this point in time, we have not had any further loss of life or serious injury. Can I ask the community today to work with us for the next 24 to 36 hours? If you could work with us, stay off the roads if you don't need to be. Be mindful that there are a number of intersections that still don't have functioning traffic lights. So it is dangerous to be out on the road if you don't need to be. Work with us for the next 24, 36 hours. If you need assistance, if it's urgent, call 000. If it's life-threatening, if it's not, call the SES on 132 500. Thank you.
Just quickly to
Yeah.
clarify, the extra assistance you've asked from the federal government, is that troops, Defence Force,
As I outlined yesterday, and I know Minister Watt's here and he can speak to that, as I outlined yesterday, as the State Disaster Coordinator, what I asked for from the Federal Government is tasks in effect. So I've asked the Federal Government to provide us support in the clean-up functions. I asked for skill sets on what's required. So as an example, to date, through our national sharing arrangements, we've got additional SES, 88 SES in from Victoria, and they come with working at height skills. Tarping roofs, getting up on roofs. We asked for additional DRA, so Disaster Relief Australia, for chainsaw skills. So they're the sort of skills I asked for out of the Federal Government. I outlined the task that's required, and it is significant clean-up, large tree removal, stabilising dangerous situations where we have trees with soft root systems now falling. And then what will occur from there is we will work very closely with the Federal Government about the skill set we need, and then a determination will be made as to what skill set I get provided. Thank you.
Good morning. Fire and emergency service crews remain very active across both response and recovery in the impacted areas of southeast Queensland. We've still got over 300 personnel in addition to those on shift personnel deployed into the area supporting those activities. The State Emergency Services received over 700 calls in the last 24-hour period, which accumulated now since Christmas is over 4,800 calls. So a very significant volume. Please, if you are out there, there's approximately 700 jobs that remain outstanding. We are working our way through those and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Rest assured we are doing everything we can as quickly as we can. Our Fire and Rescue Service Swiftwater crews have had over 20 rescues in the last 24 hours with over 50 people requiring rescue. And they've been from houses, campgrounds, cars and individuals in water. The message needs to be, if it's flooded, forget it. Don't walk in it, don't ride in it, don't drive into it. If you don't need to be out and about in these storm events, please don't be out and about. All you're doing is risking your own lives, those of the people travelling with you and our responders. So please heed that message. In terms of staying informed, we urge the community to stay informed and heed the messages quickly when that advice is received. That means actively seeking out information and staying informed. Don't assume you're going to get a text message or a knock on your door. You need to be seeking information to stay informed, to make good decisions. That's what is important to retain your safety. Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
Thanks, Deputy Premier. As the State Disaster Coordinator has mentioned, late last night we received a request from the Queensland Government to provide further ADF assistance, and I'm pleased to advise that we have approved that request this morning. What that will involve is deploying about 50 ADF personnel and high clearance vehicles to assist with the recovery effort across the Gold Coast, Scenic Rim and Logan City Council areas. In particular, those ADF personnel will be focusing on the clearance of debris to enable better access to essential infrastructure. We know that right across those three councils there remains quite a lot of the energy network which needs replacement, power lines that are down, and one of the issues is accessing that infrastructure along with water and sewage treatment plants, telecommunications infrastructure. So the ADF personnel will in particular be focusing on the clearance of debris to make it easier to access that infrastructure and get it repaired and reconnected. Those personnel, starting with an initial deployment of 30 people, will be on the ground from Thursday, the 4th of January. So we're literally in the process right now of getting them mobilised. Initially, we expect them to be available for a week, but there's an opportunity to extend that period if necessary. But having seen ADF personnel in action in the past, I know they'll be able to get through a lot in that period of time. This is something that's obviously been a matter of discussion between ourselves and the Queensland Government day after day, working out exactly what was required. I've had a couple of federal members raise it with me as well, people like Scott Buchholz, the member for Wright. But it is important to recognise that in the meantime, the Queensland Government has done an excellent job of mobilising their own personnel, interstate personnel, and that's something that we've been assisting with as well. That deployment of the ADF obviously builds on the 70 Disaster Relief Australia personnel who we activated a couple of days ago. We announced that, I think, in conjunction with Minister Boyd, and the point of that exercise is really to focus those resources on additional clearance of debris around homes. That's something that the SES has been obviously doing a marvellous job of over the last few days, but clearly some extra support was needed, and those veteran volunteers through Disaster Relief Australia have started arriving and are starting to do that work where weather permits. As the Disaster Coordinator mentioned, really the reason for activating ADF personnel now is that while Queensland had access both internally and through other states to a range of resources leading up to now, the compounding effect of this heavy rainfall and flooding on the damage that we'd already seen with the storms meant that, frankly, Queensland did need a bit of a hand with extra resources, and they were brave enough to ask, and we were happy to deliver with that support as well. So all up, we're talking about 120 120 personnel either through the ADF or DRA who'll be working with state personnel in coming days to help get that infrastructure relieved and those homes cleaned up. Just while I'm on my feet, I might also just mention we are, of course, as a federal government, also paying close attention to the flooding issues in northern New South Wales. At this stage, I think it's fair to say that they're not as serious as what we're seeing in southeast Queensland, but there are parts of northern New South Wales that already have some flood warnings in place. So again, please, for residents in those areas, the same warnings apply. Stay off the roads if you can avoid it. If it's flooded, forget it. Keep yourself safe. And on the other side of the country, unfortunately, it looks like we are looking at some serious bushfires in Western Australia in coming days. So we have moved the national large water bombing plane back to WA to assist with that effort as well. I'll let Minister McCallum go through this in detail, but as the Deputy Premier mentioned, we're also pleased today to be able to announce some further joint federal-state assistance to assist small businesses and primary producers. But as I say, I'll leave it for Minister McCallum to run through the detail of that.
Thanks, Minister. Minister McCallum.
We know that many small businesses are doing it tough following these major storms. And that's why we've been very pleased to work with the Albanese federal government to help provide support so that they can recover, rebuild and get back on track. And today we're very pleased to announce jointly funded concessional loans which will be available for impacted small businesses in the Logan, Scenic Rim and Gold Coast local government areas. This support includes disaster assistance concessional loans of up to $250,000, $250,000 to repair or replace damaged buildings, plant, stock and equipment. There's also essential working capital loans of up to $100,000 available to help enable continued operations for affected businesses. Now that might include paying rent or wages. There are over 104,000 small businesses across these impacted regions. Now, not all businesses will be impacted, but that really does give an idea of the potential scale of the impact of these storms. In addition to the jointly funded federal and state assistance programs, we are also providing free assistance from our Queensland Small Business Commissioner. That is free mediation that's available for impacted businesses between the 25th of December to 2023 on Christmas Day through to the 13th of June this year. Today is also marking the start of our new Natural Disaster Business Survey. This survey is going to help measure and quantify the impact of severe weather events and help identify the next steps for recovery support. And I'd like to encourage any impacted business to complete the survey, which is now live on our Business Queensland website. We're going to use data from the survey to help determine what additional support might be required and learnings for the future. We know that recovery is a very long and often winding road, but I want our small businesses to know that if you've been affected, the Miles government has your back. And if there's a small business in your community that is reopened or is about to reopen, please consider supporting them. Drop in, say hello, buy a coffee, and let them know that our hard-working small businesses are backed by Queenslanders.
That's great. Nikki.
Good morning. It's been another very busy night for our emergency service staff, and can I firstly thank those staff from the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, from the SES, those folks who have come in from interstate to assist us from New South Wales and from Victoria, the community recovery staff that are working hard with locals to make sure that people can access the financial assistance that they need, and also the DRA staff that we have on the ground at the moment. Can I also thank locals for their patience as well? I understand that a significant amount of time has passed since Christmas, and that's been a tough time for a lot of locals. We're doing everything that we can through our frontline workers to make sure that people can recover as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, we've got the weather to contend with as we do that work. The weather keeps on coming, and we're asking people to endure that for the moment, because we've certainly got crews there ready to work, ready to assist as soon as there is a break in the weather. And can I ask people from all around the country and from all around the state to look out for each other? It's one of the things that as Queenslanders we do best, but understand that it's been a very difficult time for people throughout the southeast corner, and also people in the north who are continuing to recover from ex-tropical cyclone Jasper and the floods in far north Queensland. We've seen very significant falls overnight, and there's more to come. From Maryborough to the border, we expect up to 350 millimetres of rain to continue. It's a very dangerous forecast that we are facing over the next 24 hours. And for many people who are in or around those waterways, we're asking them to be particularly cautious. One of the things that I'm conscious of is the 20 swift water rescues that we have conducted since 5 a.m. on Monday. Those folks from fire and emergency services are very highly specialised, and they've been out assisting people who have been stranded in vehicles, assisting people in their homes, and also assisting people at campsites. Over 50 people have been rescued, and 44 of those came from Natural Bridge campsite. I'm asking Queenslanders to please consider their activities over the next 24 hours in particular. If you're at a campsite, if you're on the road and you don't necessarily need to be there, please think about what precautions you can take to keep yourself and our emergency service staff safe over the next 24 hours. Thankfully, we've had no reports of serious injury within this time, but we know we've had 700 requests for SES support over the last 24 hours. Since Christmas Day, that number is 4,800 requests for SES assistance, including more than 3,900 at the Gold Coast, Scenic Rim and Logan areas. We've got more than 220 SES, Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue Service personnel on the ground right now in these areas, along with 70 appliances and support vehicles. There is more than 100 people who have been deployed from interstate. The work is focused on chainsaw and working at heights across our emergency services, so we can make sure that people's roofs are tarped, that trees are cleared, and also we can reconnect essential services. Fire and Rescue have assessed already 3,500 properties with significant damage in storm-affected parts of the southeast corner. In terms of our disaster recovery, the QRA, the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, has announced 2 Deputy State Recovery Coordinators. One of them is based in the north, in the far north of Queensland, looking out for those communities who've been impacted by the cyclone and the floods. That's QFES Deputy Commissioner Mike Wassing. And here in the south, we've got a designated resource allocated, which is QPS Assistant Commissioner Ben Marcus. Their job will be the eyes and ears on the ground, making sure that local government and communities are feeding into state around what kinds of work needs to be conducted in this recovery effort, so we can make sure that we're getting communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. In terms of the storm, we've got the ability to, now with the floods, to be able to have a look at extending the activation of this event as well. So far, we've had 78,000 people apply for personal hardship assistance across both the north and the south of our state. And we've had 10,000 calls to the recovery hubs as well from people. So we know that we've got a number of people who need assistance, both financial but rebuild assistance as well. And we're going to stand with those people every step of the way to make sure that we get these communities back up on their feet. In terms of damage assessments across the north and the south, I can report that 21 homes have been destroyed, 990 homes have moderate damage, and 280 homes have severe damage. We're, of course, through this recovery effort, having a look and assessing these situations around how we can provide more support, both financial and other means, to community as we recover together.
Just, Mr. Boyd, while you're there, just on the damage assessments, you mentioned it's from north and south.
Yes, I can find them.
Could you split them up?
I could if I had my phone on me, but I don't have my phone on me right now. Apologies, the numbers that I have are combined, but I'll get back to you with the split numbers. Thank you.
In regards to the North residents in Dagara, I feel like they've been forgotten about the floods. They say they've had no help at all. When does the government plan to do something to send more resources up that way?
I understand how devastated the community of Dagara has been through the flooding event. Dagara is just on the other side of the Bloomfield River to Wujal, and the amount of water that went through that community was absolutely significant. I haven't been on the ground in Dagara, I've only flown over it, and sorry, because the sites are just absolutely devastating around Dagara. Minister Butcher was in Dagara a couple of days ago. We've had our QRA CEO, Jake Elwood, who's been in Dagara only yesterday. The plan for Dagara and Wujal is to recover those communities at the same time. We plan on barging in infrastructure and doing the community recovery work there for both Dagara and Wujal simultaneously. Of course, it's been hard for residents in Dagara. We've offered to evacuate those residents post-event. Many of them decided to stay on. So we were supporting them through resupply of things like food and other essentials. But the reports that have come to me around the folks that stayed on in Dagara is that they're exhausted and that they need more assistance. And we'll be providing that assistance to them through the Douglas Shire Council, through the QRA, as we continue to recover from the event.
We know that more than 100 people have been deployed, SES people have been deployed from interstate. How many Queensland SES folk, I guess, are on deck?
Steve?
Thank you. So, yeah, there's 88 personnel deployed from Victorian SES, 42 from New South Wales SES, and effectively, and this is an approximate figure because it fluctuates on people travelling from a region day time, about 170 SES from Queensland, supported by a similar number of Rural Fire Service and Fire Rescue personnel.
What is the size of Queensland's SES volunteer force?
It's approximately 3,000 volunteers in the SES workforce.
That's significantly lower than it was less than 10 years ago. Considering, I guess, the cascading and consecutive nature of disasters, what is the plan to stop that decrease?
Yeah, so at the moment a significant investment over the last 2 years has been made into state emergency service to boost numbers, boost training, boost equipment. So a general uplift in the state emergency service across the board, and so that work is underway and is delivering dividends in terms of our training outcomes and recruitment outcomes as we speak.
Deputy Premier, with the Brisbane sort of coming to the firing line with this weather system moving up from the Gold Coast, what's the situation with Wyman and High? Are there any plans for dam releases? Is there any concern about river flooding in the coming days?
Seqwater is working on monitoring all of those dams. They've gone to an alert status, but they are well used to dealing with torrential downpours in the southeast. So they're monitoring all of those dams closely, and of course they will update the community if any action needs to be taken. But at this stage they're just in a monitoring position to monitor all of those dams across the southeast.
Is there any threat for big river flooding like we saw in 2022, or is it more localised sort of?
Well, not that I've been briefed to this point, but happy to get you that information from Seqwater.
We've seen some pretty extraordinary vision come out of Mount Tamborine of homes that were inundated by water. They've been severely damaged. Are there any plans for assistance or a temporary accommodation to be provided for those residents?
Yes, there's evacuation centres and temporary accommodation available to individuals who are impacted. You've heard about the Gold Coast today. Thankfully, some people went into the evacuation centres but have now been supported by family and friends. So those services are available for the government, from the government, if it's required by householders who've had the double whammy of those storms and now those floods. And of course, we'll provide them with whatever support they need until the rain event finishes, the waters subside, and they can get back to some normalcy.
Generators? Anything on backup generators?
Yeah, there's a whole range of activity that Energex is engaged in. Not only do we have more than 500 police, fire and SES personnel out in the community, we've got 700 Energex staff and crew members out in the community. Some of their work had to be paused because of the weather event, the rain we've had over the last 24, 36 hours. But they're out there and they're looking at a range of mechanisms to respond. I was out with the crews at Tamborine on Sunday, and you could just see the devastation to the power system. Some of the parts of the power system have been obliterated effectively, and they have to be rebuilt. You see some of the power lines that have effectively been shredded by the wind that impacted that part of Queensland, but they're doing a mighty job. It was hot, stifling work on Sunday, but they are out there doing their very best. What we're looking at, of course, is microgrids, other generators that can be put on site. Following a request from the community on Sunday, we spoke with the federal government, and I want to acknowledge Federal Minister Senator Murray Watt for his help to look at whether we could stand up ADF generation support. We investigated that. The reality is those generators do not fit comfortably with the state electricity system, but we examined that issue. We couldn't make that work, but we are looking at other resources, including commercial generation as required. But Energex has done an amazing job. We've got 92% of households and customers that lost power. They're now back online. There's now 11,000 households or customers without power. And we're looking to restore those as quickly as possible. We're hoping to get everyone back as far as we can on the 5th of January, but I think that will be delayed a little bit because of the weather event. But Energex is doing an incredible job in difficult circumstances to get that power up. But for some parts of the southeast, this isn't restoration, this is rebuild, because the energy system has been destroyed. And so we have to rebuild the energy system before we can connect homes. But I spoke with some householders on Sunday too, and they understand the impact it's had. They were very understanding and very thankful of the work that Energex was doing in their street in Tamborine. So we're working through all of that, and we will get that power on as quickly as possible. We know how frustrating it is. We know how difficult it is for families, in particular at this time of the year. But we're working as hard as we can to get that power restored.
Bureau just addressed that question, on the any threat of widespread river flooding in Brisbane like we saw in 2022, or is that not really a concern?
Yeah, so during this event we do have a flood watch that's in force for the lower Brisbane River and also of course the upper Brisbane River. So that means at least there could be the potential for some isolated minor to moderate flooding along the Brisbane River during the course of this event. I guess one of the other things is of course in parts of Brisbane we've got a lot of creek systems. They're now becoming wet, and there is that still ongoing risk of heavy rainfall, so that risk of localised flash flooding will also remain a risk during the course of this event. Could we see levels reach what they did during the course of the February 22 events? At the moment it's looking fairly low, but I guess we've still got 24 hours to play out in this weather event. But yeah, generally we're looking at the increased risk of flash flooding around Brisbane with the potential for isolated minor to moderate flooding. I guess going forward from here, we're only in early January. And our catchments are now well and truly saturated around the southeast corner. So we just have to be mindful that even if it doesn't happen during the course of this event, that should we have any follow-up rainfall after this one, our catchments will now be much more responsive than what they may have been at the start of this event.
It's a bit wet for an El Niño, isn't it?
So generally, during the course of El Niños, we do experience very dry and hot conditions during the course of spring. But once we do enter our summer months, Queensland is very much open to a normal or wet season. We've seen that in past events where El Niño does impact us with hot and dry conditions during the course of spring, sometimes during the course of summer. But yeah, we're very much open to having normal wet seasons with major flooding and even landfall and tropical cyclones, which we've already seen during the course of this season.
Would you say through some of the rainfall totals that we've seen over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, of course. I don't have all the specific numbers on hand, but in general, the focus of much of the rainfall in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. was very much around our Gold Coast and the Gold Coast hinterland areas, including around those that were significantly impacted by the Christmas Day storm activity. In general, we saw around 200 to 300 millimetres of rainfall in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. in many of those areas, and as a result, that's what led to a lot of those flood warnings being issued for a number of our rivers and creeks down south. Around Brisbane and up towards the Sunshine Coast, generally totals were lower than that, with totals generally in the order of around 50 to 100 millimetres in total, but we have seen some locally heavier ones, and of course that's only going to build over the next 24 hours during the course of this event.
It's also been pretty hard to predict the rainfall totals given the unstable sort of weather event that we're seeing. Can you kind of explain why that is?
Well, look, with every weather event, they all come with their own degree of predictability. And during this one, yeah, we've seen an increase in the storm activity. There's definitely been signatures since the before Christmas that we're going to enter a very active period of thunderstorms around Queensland, and that's just set to continue over the next couple of days. But hopefully with this weather conditions, we're going to still see it continue during the course of today and overnight, potentially even extending into the early part of Wednesday. But hopefully once we get past tomorrow morning, we'll see a decrease in the amount of rainfall around the southeast corner from tomorrow morning onwards.
Question for QS as well, just in that within the Valley Rescue, I believe that the Minister was talking about earlier. Have you got any further details on that? I believe 44 campers were rescued from that side.
The Natural Bridge area, campground in the Natural Bridge area, 60 people were encamped there, 44 selected to be removed from that location. The remainder stayed in place. They were then evacuated and transported to a place of shelter in Nerang.
Were they caught out there by those rising creek levels or river levels in that area?
Yeah, the rainfall in that area was, as we've heard, was very significant, and obviously the water came up more quickly than they'd anticipated. Yes.
Some questions for Minister Watt, if possible. Every disaster we have the same discussion around the use of the army and the multiple calls for the army to only be used as a thing of last resort. The federal government late last year put a discussion paper out on alternative capabilities for crisis response. When can we see, results from that?
Yeah, you're right. This is an ongoing discussion, and it comes up in pretty much every major disaster right around the country, including this one as well. The challenge that we have is that we need to balance the needs, the very real needs for communities to get the assistance they need after a disaster, primarily from state, territory and local governments, but sometimes supplemented by the federal government. We need to balance that need with the much more complex and uncertain strategic environment Australia operates in these days. And what that means is that we need to make sure also that our ADF has the opportunity to focus on its primary task, which is defending the nation. And to be able to do that, they also need to be able to train throughout the year, use their resources for that purpose. So it is always a balancing exercise to make sure that communities are getting the support that they need, including from the ADF when necessary, with not overly stretching the ADF away from its primary goal being defending the nation. But you will have seen that even a couple of weeks ago we activated the ADF to assist with the far north Queensland floods. We're activating them again today. We've activated them for the Kimberley floods last year, the ongoing floods we had in New South Wales and Victoria. So we are obviously always prepared to make sure that we use the ADF when the circumstances require. But what we need to do is work out what are some other options that we have at the federal level to supplement the resources that states and territories have as well. We're not seeking to come in and take over disaster management from the states and territories. It will always be primarily the responsibility of states and territories because they're much closer to the ground than the federal government is. But we recognise that there are times when disasters are so big that they go beyond the resources that states and territories have available to them, and that's when we come in. And that's what we're doing today. In terms of that discussion paper you're talking about, as I say, we several months ago actually began a consultation process around what do we need to be doing at the federal level to make sure that we can respond adequately to the needs of communities, the needs of states, territories and local governments going forward, because we need to remember that with climate change, we are going to be seeing more of these extreme weather events than we have in the past. And what that means, if the circumstances change, you need to change your approach. So we've begun that consultation process. A discussion paper went out late last year. We're going through the submissions now. It's always been our intention to come to a landing on that over the course of this calendar year. As we continue to roll out additional supports, we're already building a national emergency management stockpile, which the country's never had before, again to supplement the states and territories. We're bringing in new national messaging services. We're delivering a lot more investment in disaster mitigation. And this piece of the puzzle, being the personnel requirements, is something that we expect to finalise this year.
So that's like a national civilian service. Is the government open to that?
Well, there are all sorts of ideas that have been put up in that consultation process. Some people say we should have a national SES. Some people say we shouldn't. Some people say we should have all sorts of things. I'm personally sceptical about the need to create a national SES, for want of a better term, because I'm very conscious of not depleting the personnel that we have and that we really need at the state and territory level. So we haven't made any firm decisions yet about exactly what that federal response will look like. That's what the consultation process has been about. It also includes equipment. It includes aviation assets. We need to get a lot better prepared as a country for disasters than we historically have been. I think you'd have to accept that the Albanese government has been putting a lot of work into doing that, but we need to do more.
I guess, is there no discussion around, splitting off part of the Defence Force, a paid national civilian service to come and, whose entire job is dealing with natural disasters?
I'm not sure that anyone's really floating the idea of splitting off part of the Defence Force, because, as I say, we actually need the Defence Force for its job, protecting Australia in a much more uncertain world these days. But certainly, some people have suggested that we do need to be building some kind of national civilian service. It might also be about how we can, as a federal government, supplement the states and territories to build up their SES volunteer numbers, or we might be moving more towards having more part-time paid people in those sort of services, particularly to be used as a surge workforce over the disaster season. There are a range of different options. It's a bit too early for me to be able to commit to anything, but that's what we'll be finalising this year.
Volunteering across the board, not just in the SES, has declined over the last decade. What hope does any government have of increasing those volunteer numbers? Isn't it just time for a paid service?
Volunteering is obviously going through really challenging circumstances, whether it be Meals on Wheels or SES services. And as I say, we are open to the idea that we do need more people to be engaged in a paid form, whether that be full-time or part-time, at the federal level or the state and territory level. But all of those issues are things that we're working on right now to work that out. But in the meantime, we are activating the ADF when they're needed, and the first step in building that federal response is our investment in Disaster Relief Australia. We went to the election committee to do that. We've delivered that now through our budget, $38 million in funding to Disaster Relief Australia to build up their volunteer numbers, primarily from veterans, and they're on the ground now in the Gold Coast region helping. So that's the first step as we work out that broader piece.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, just quickly on QRA, has that been activated at all for the Gold Coast Scenic Rim region in terms of homes that have been destroyed, basically?
When you say QRA, yes, I'll let Nikki respond to that, but we've activated QRA for disaster recovery. Nikki, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. So we've activated disaster, we've activated for the event that was the Christmas storms. We're looking to extend that to cover off the flooding event at the moment. So we'll have more to say on that in coming days. And in terms of that, that activation, what we'd be looking to do is have both the Christmas Day storms and the flooding event joined together as one single event. So we are doing some assessment at the moment in terms of what the damage looks like to be able to know what the appropriate response would be to activate different hardship and financial assistance supports into the future.
Relief the BC family considering the release of that team that was in connection to that case.
I'm advised that the Parole Board is reviewing all of the circumstances associated with this matter. Ultimately, it's a matter for the Independent Parole Board. I've sought the assurances that the Beasley family are kept informed. I've also reached out to Brett Beasley and had a conversation with him this morning. I'm also advised that the individual remains in custody while the Parole Board reviews this matter. It's usual practice for victim impact statements to be sought. That's why I think that it's important that the circumstances are reviewed. I'll be keeping the Beasleys informed and keeping the public informed as appropriate. Ours is a government that puts victims first, and in circumstances like this, the families must be heard.
On that, so the decision hasn't fully been finalised. There could be an overturning of that interim decision at the moment.
It's ultimately a matter for the Parole Board, the Independent Parole Board, but I'm advised that they're reviewing all of the circumstances associated with the matter.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.